Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, is back. We're going to talk about Dell Demps finally being let go in New Orleans. We're going to talk about All-Star Weekend here, a little bit of some exciting stuff going on in Charlotte. I'm not down in Charlotte. I decided to stay back in Los Angeles just because, well, yeah, I don't really need to be there. Then we're going to move on. We're going to talk about some draft stuff, whether or not we think Zion Williamson is the best asset in the NBA right now, which I think is like a very real question. And then finally, Cole wrote about DeAndre Hunter, who's long been one of my favorite prospects. And obviously Cole's a fan as well and has been for a while. So we're going to talk about all of that going forward. Cole, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Running on fumes at the end of the week. I would not advise writing a 40-minute piece on any prospect unless you're insane. So I kind of learned the hard way this week, but it's going well, man. How are you doing? So
I haven't read your DeAndre Hunter thing yet. Like, how many words did it end up being?
I think it was about 7,000. It was around that range.
Yeah, that's always a good time to break down someone that in depth. It really is. I enjoy doing it. Someone who might not have been breaking down players that in depth was Dell Demps. Dell Demps was finally let go by the New Orleans Pelicans, the New Orleans basketball organization, realistically, that he had been working for since 2010. He was hired, I believe, on July 21st, 2010, is what Basketball Reference has at least. Your immediate reaction to Dell Demps being fired? We'll just start.
I mean, I'm not surprised. That's my reading the news. It was kind of like pseudo expected, especially with the transition going from the Anthony Davis era to moving him in the offseason. I don't know if they trusted Dell Demps to make that trade. So
probably when it happened,
it kind of made a lot of sense to me. And I hate saying that about someone who's fired, but I think the writing was on the wall here.
Yeah, so I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was unsurprised. Adrian Wojnarowski threw some color on the situation, said that ownership was livid, that Anthony Davis left the arena early during Thursday night's game. There's been some further discussion that he did it to go get an MRI after getting hurt during that game. He hurt his shoulder. Apparently they don't really have like an MRI machine in the arena, which seems normal. Gail Benson wants to totally overhaul this whole deal. One factor that Cole and I have been talking about throughout this whole process is that, the specter of Mickey Loomis kind of is over this entire deal, right? How involved is the New Orleans Saints lead executive on the basketball operations of the New Orleans Pelicans? It seems like Gail Benson wants to hire basketball people there now. So far, there's been some speculation about names. David Griffin, Mike Zarin has been brought up. Danny Ferry will at least get a shake, it seems like. He's the interim GM. Obviously was the general manager of the Atlanta Hawks, kind of put together that team that went on that had 60 win seasons and then ended up kind of losing that job after, what was it? It was racially charged emails were released, correct?
I believe that was the case, yes.
So kind of a, convoluted situation there as well in terms of his candidacy. Ultimately, I think that the Dell Demps era is just going to be recognized as one that was filled with missed opportunities. There's just not another way to put it. You have a top 25 player of all time, in my opinion, by the time Anthony Davis ends up retiring in your organization, and you end up winning, I think, one playoff series. Is that right? The one that they won last year?
I believe that's correct. Yeah, that's the first time they got into the second round. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's kind of a convoluted situation, and you look at kind of the takeaways from this regime, and I think they kind of tried to short circuit too much. We've talked about that in the past, trading too many first round picks in advance. They, of course, made the Drew Holiday trade. I love Drew Holiday. I think he's a fantastic player, but he's probably not the second best player on a title team. He's probably more like the fourth, ideally, in a very, very good one.
I would say third. I think Drew can be a third guy on a title team.
Maybe third. Yeah, I'll give you that for sure. But I don't think he's a second guy. And they traded picks for him. They traded Noel. And they kind of just went all in. And they kept trying to go all in on the short term, trying to get pieces next to Davis instead of building long term. And I think a lot of people have made a connection with this in the Dallas situation, trading for Kristaps. There might be some validity to that, even though I think Kristaps is probably a little higher on the totem pole as far as creation than Holiday is in his element. But I think it is an interesting case just to see, maybe like take a step back and build long term instead of just trying to every year win now on the margins, maybe improve a little bit short term, but then you lose that long term sense of just building around Davis and actually building a real contender.
So if I remember correctly, they ended up trading. So he takes over the job. He gets Chris Paul for 1 year, right? A move that is emblematic of that is they trade their 2011 first round pick for Jared Bayless, I believe, in 2010. Then they end up, struggling along as they did during the Chris Paul era, and they have to trade Chris Paul. David Stern is, Cole and I have joked in the past on this, decided that Dell Demps was so bad at his job that he had to step in and stop a deal from happening that would have sent Chris Paul to the Lakers. He ends up doing a deal with the Clippers, Al Farouk Aminu, Eric Gordon, Chris Kaman, and Austin Rivers, essentially. It was a 2012 first-round pick. Very bizarre deal in a lot of ways, I think. It's one that is difficult to evaluate now because Eric Gordon obviously had the injury issues at the time. Eric Gordon was considered a very strong prospect. He was coming off of a 22 point per game season in his third season. And, things really seemed to be looking up if he could stay off of the injury list. And he ended up continuing to get hurt and ended up not really reaching his potential in New Orleans. And then, Al Farouk Aminu is always been kind of a role player. And, Austin Rivers ended up just being a poor pick at the end of the day. So I understand that there was a lot of difficult waters to navigate, but I don't think that, Dell Demps ever really did anything that was particularly high level, right? Like you look at even like in 2012, they trade Trevor Ariza and Emeka Okafor for Rashard Lewis and just like that deal, basically, which I believe at the time had 1 year left and they just wanted to kind of, I don't remember if that deal was to get off of money or if it was because the deal was definitely to get off of money because they ended up cutting Rashard Lewis, if I remember correctly, 10 days later. And, like Trevor Ariza is a guy that, think about their wing problems that they've had over the years. Like Trevor Ariza would have significantly helped the New Orleans Hornets during this Anthony Davis era. And they trade Trevor Ariza 8 days before they draft Anthony Davis. And then you look at the Solomon Hill signing. You look at the, Etuan Moore signing to an extent, although I think you can make a case that, Etuan Moore for $8 million a year was not necessarily a abject disaster. It's just one of total missed opportunities. There's no other way to put it. This era is going to be looked upon as a failure for the New Orleans Pelicans organization, despite the fact that they had a guy in Anthony Davis that is going to make the All-NBA team 10 times during his career.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really summarize it any better than that. It's going to be looked down on for the moves they made and for it not making total sense. And again, in a long-term sustainable approach. And
by the way, all of those deals that I just said, they happened within the first 5 years of Dell Demps' tenure. He's been there 9.
Yeah, he's been there a while. And the Boogie Cousins trade, I liked at the time. I didn't see Buddy Hield blowing up like this as far as being the second best shooter in the league. So at that time, I think that in the moment, that was a very fair trade to make. I'm
honestly not going to kill them for that deal. They paid a reasonable price for DeMarcus Cousins, and DeMarcus Cousins got hurt.
Exactly right. I do kind of kill them a little bit for the negotiations there and kind of playing hardball with Cousins. I get it because of the injury, but I think that stuff kind of looks bad to agents. It looks bad to future prospects when you hardline someone like that. But I do understand it from a pure injury standpoint. You don't want to give Boogie Cousins a 4-year max when you don't know about the Achilles and whatnot. But I think that just kind of summarized the regime a little bit. I don't know how likable they were necessarily, and this is not coming from a ton of inside information, but overall, I just can't really paint this at all in a positive picture. I mean, he's going to be remembered a lot for the Jrue Holiday trade, and frankly, that might be one of the better trades if you've gone down the list like you just did. Like, that might be one of the better trades made, but you just got to fixate
it's unquestionably the best deal that this front office made. 2 first-round picks for a guy that, in my opinion, is probably one of the 30 best players in the league. Like, I'm pretty okay with that, especially given that one of them was in the 2013 draft, which was, as you and I have talked about, it's we found players later in that draft like Giannis and Rudy Gobert and, a few others, that CJ McCollum, Steven Adams, that ended up being successful outside of the top 10. But you know what, that was a tough draft to evaluate in for a lot of different reasons, mostly because it was a lot of high upside guys that you can't be super certain were going to make the leap, and then some, high floor, low upside guys that, just weren't necessarily going to make like a wild impact.
And I didn't mind the first round pick for Mirotic, even though that kind of summarizes the short term gains. I thought he really helped them last year in the playoffs, though, and I think that he's worth a first round pick. And him getting dealt this year for 4 second rounders and Stanley Johnson or whatever, I think that people are kind of overvaluing picks a little bit too much now as far as return. Like, Mirotic is definitely worth a first round pick in my opinion, if you can actually optimize him like the Bucks are going to. So I didn't mind that trade either, but earlier on in the regime, I thought that they could have done a better job building around Davis long-term and not trying to trade so many assets to put players that are very good, like Jrue Holiday is obviously an excellent player, but he's not a number 2 on a title team. Yeah. And I think their focus should have been getting that second guy, that third guy, maybe Holiday is the third guy. But yeah, I think that should have been the focus, and that's the takeaway for me, at least with this regime, is you have to look long-term, sustainable, and build around Davis and build a product that can actually win. Yeah,
I think that's all very reasonable. I mean, like, I'd imagine Dell Demps will continue to work in front offices just because that's, the way the NBA works, as Cole said at the start. He has a Spurs background. He's considered someone that has a pretty good eye. So, we'll see. Maybe he just wasn't right for the lead job. Some guys aren't right for the lead job at the end of the day, and that's totally fine. And, hopefully he will find success elsewhere. But unfortunately, go ahead.
I was going to say, who do you think gets this job now? I think that's kind of interesting to talk about. We've heard David Griffin. What about Sam Hinkie? I mean, that's a really fascinating name for a team that might go into a total rebuild mode. You talked about the ownership. I'm not sure how that dynamic's going to play out, but if they trade Davis,
it's interesting because, like, I don't think they can go into a full rebuild mode. Do you?
I don't know. Like, what else are they going to do, really? I mean, unless you just want to toggle in the middle permanently, and, like, if you make a trade, let's say they trade with the Clippers or something, just hypothetically, and get Danilo Gallinari. Very solid player, but not good enough to win you anything. Do you want to be a middling team? That's, like, the worst place to be.
God, that'd be funny if they traded for Danilo. What, you do, like, I don't even know what you could do for Danilo right now, because they've passed the deadline. Like, that's actually, like, not a disaster move in my opinion. It would have made them better, I guess, right now, and that's not what they want. They want to have their pick be as bad as possible, but he is someone that would have helped them at the end of the day right now. If I'm them, I don't think that they want to bottom out totally. I just don't think that is their goal at all. I think that they want to try and stay good, or at least, like, stay somewhat relevant, I think is the way to put it, because that market is very difficult. That is a hard market to continue to attract people to. So if that continues to be the case, I don't think that you can do, like, a prolonged, Hinkian, processy rebuild. It's just not something that I think goes well there.
I think that's definitely fair. I mean, the basketball market seems to be a lot different than the football market. I mean, the Saints fans are just absolutely ridiculous. Like, that's one of the best football markets in the country, in my opinion.
It's kind of like the Portland market for basketball for football.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good comparison. So I don't really know too much about the dynamics as far as Pelican fans attendance. I'm not going to put them in a certain stigma or whatnot. But just from a practical standpoint, looking at that roster and looking at what you want to do moving forward, I don't know what deal they really make. I brought up Gallinari in a hypothetical trade if they trade Davis to the Clippers and you get back Shea and all that. And I don't know how that dynamic's going to play out if the Celtics offer Tatum. We've talked about all this. But, like, what trade are you really making that makes you relevant? That's what I'm saying. Like, you'd be relevant, but more in a long-term sense. If you get Tatum, it's not like Tatum alone's going to get you, like, into the playoffs, right? Like, you're just trying to get the best long-term asset.
Right. So I think that their idea on Tatum would be that he can help us somewhat soon. And you pair him with Drew, you probably have to get back Marcus Smart in that deal just to make the salaries match. So you end up with like Drew and Marcus plus Jason Tatum plus, a couple of other younger players. You can have a pretty good defense pretty quickly with those guys and with some of the other pieces that they can maybe find a way to build around. And that's how you stay competitive.
Yeah, I think that might be the mindset. I mean, for me personally, I would probably trade Drew just because I think his value is really high.
I agree with you for what it's worth on that.
Yeah, so I don't know what the point. Like, of course, Drew and Marcus Smart would be absolutely fucking awesome to watch. Like, defensively, that would be one of the best backcourts we've seen in a long, long time defensively. But if I'm the Pelicans, like, it doesn't make sense to keep Drew in a vacuum and pair him with Tatum and Smart. Like, that's still not good enough. But I do agree with you. I think that might be their mindset. They want to stay relevant. They want to stay solid enough. It's not like they're putting a terrible, terrible product on the floor. But I think they should flip Drew because he's already 28. Like, he's older than you'd think he is. And he does have a lot of value right now. He can help so many teams, and there's such a demand for a player that has his combination of skills.
Yeah, like if I'm them, I am 100% like calling maybe like Utah or something and trying to get like multiple young assets and multiple picks and trying to make that work.
Yes.
Because like they could really use Drew. That would be an awesome backcourt, Drew and Donovan Mitchell. There are just a lot of ways. I agree with you. If I was them, I would trade Drew, but I don't know if that's what the mindset is that they want to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And teams have different mindsets than the public and the media. Like we always think that the league operates or idealistically operates in this. You're either trying to compete or you're trying to tank. And there's a lot of teams that don't function that way. They're more just like we're trying to like have a decent product on the floor to sell tickets. And that could be the realization here.
Yeah, no question. Is there anything else we want to talk about here?
Not really for me. I think that a guy like David Griffin would be awesome. I'm a huge Griffin fan. I've loved what he's done for the media as far as his coverage. So if he got the job, I think that would be a step in the right direction. Yeah,
I think David Griffin's super smart. He, anytime that, I've talked to him maybe like once or twice and, maybe even like, I think I've met him like once and then like kind of talked to him like, through DMs or whatever a couple times. He's a really good dude. He has a great reputation around people, like across the NBA. Just thinks he's a great dude. There's a lot to like about what he did with the Cavs in terms of just asset management as well. I think that he handled their cap sheet really, really well and in a very creative way. That would be a very smart hire if he was willing to take it. If I was David Griffin, I might be looking for a more stable situation though, because the other part of this entire deal is like ownership in New Orleans and the market is somewhat unstable.
Yeah, that's the key is the ownership. And that's the most important ingredient to every franchise is how they're managed, how the ownership is. I think the opportunity, honestly, for Griffin would be a good one just to kind of rebuild the team if he was allowed the versatility and the flexibility to do that. But it's hard to say, have a stark opinion on this without knowing the ownership and that, because it's all about what you're governed by in this state. So if ownership is not going to let you do and carry out a full rebuild, if it's going to be like trading for, in theory, a Gallinari type, maybe Griffin would be better off passing on it. But I do think the opportunity is really interesting.
Yeah. Regardless of who they end up with, it's going to be a pretty big gamble for that GM to end up taking his job there and really trying to build around what is a tough market. But another place that you can gamble is Bet Online. It's another huge weekend across the NBA, All-Star Weekend. There is only one place to get in on all of the action. It's betonline.ag. Sports, casinos, a virtual casino, you name it. Betonline.ag is CLNS Media's preferred sportsbook online. Use that promo code CLNS50 for that 50% sign-up bonus. CLNS50 is that promo code. Look, we talked about the betting odds on the slam dunk contest last time. Let's kind of jump in and talk about maybe the 3-point contest this time. I'm very interested in the 3-point contest. You look at who's there. We've got Seth Curry. We've got Stephen Curry. Dirk is in it. Buddy Hield, Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, Kemba Walker, Danny Green, Devin Booker, and Joe Harris. I mean, this is a 10-person 3-point shootout this time. That never happens.
Yeah, it's a really interesting field here. Seth Curry is my guy for this. I don't know why. I'm feeling Seth here. I'm gonna go with him.
So so here are the odds. We've got plus 275 for Stephen Curry, plus 325 for Hield, plus 450 for Devin Booker, 550 for Seth Curry, 600 for Joe Harris, 750 for Lillard, 800 for Green, 1,000 for Chris Middleton, 1,000 for Kemba Walker, and 1,500 for Dirk. I think that my pick is going to be Joe Harris. I have a funny feeling that Joe Harris is going to just destroy this competition. Honestly, what are we doing though, betting against Steph? It's ridiculous, I feel.
Yeah, Steph's too in vogue though. You can't pick Steph. I mean, everybody's going to do that, even though, of course, if my life was on the line, if I was looking at it from that standpoint, I would pick Steph. But I think that from a narrative standpoint and how good of a shooter Steph Curry is, I think that'd be kind of fun if he beat his brother in this.
Yeah. Bet online, it really is just the best. You can go online or use your mobile phone to sign up today at betonline.ag. You can try in-game live betting where you can participate with all the action with every play. Use the promo code CLNS50 for that 50% sign up bonus. That's betonline.ag. Is there anything else you're looking forward to this All-Star weekend?
I mean, I always watch the dunk contest, even though it always leaves some to be desired, even though there's been some awesome dunks. The judging and all of that is kind of, I don't know. It's always disappointed me a little bit, but I'm not a huge All-Star Weekend guy, really. It's I watch the game in the background, mostly the fourth quarter when guys ramp it up a little bit. It's kind of interesting because someone like Giannis is going to try. So that's kind of fun just because he's gonna give a fuck. But for the most part, it's entertaining, but I'll have it on in the background. It's not something I really fixate on.
Yeah, I'll probably watch it. I might go out to a bar or something and watch it. I won't go too crazy with it though. It's just it's something fun, I guess. And then the All-Star game itself, like you said, I expect Giannis to go out and try. Giannis's team has a very funky composition. He took a ton of big guys. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it says a lot about Giannis, the GM. It's kind of funny. I didn't actually watch the draft. I'm kind of disappointed I didn't. I heard really rave reviews about it. A lot of people liked the dynamic, and people were kind of making fun of Giannis a little bit for picking all the bigs. But it should be kind of interesting. Again, I think that having someone like Giannis to really set the tempo in that game, he's going to care, and that's kind of fun.
Well, the best part of it was when who did LeBron take? LeBron took Anthony Davis, I believe, and said isn't that tampering? Just the perfect timing, little moments where Giannis is just a perfect human. Giannis might be our best human.
He might be the most likable player in the league. I was making a list on this, and I think Steven Adams is up there, maybe Drew Holiday, but Giannis is in the top 5, I think.
Yeah, just in terms of, I think Giannis is number one in terms of likability plus exposure. Because the more that you get exposed, the more, Kevin Durant would have been near the top of this. Everyone loved Kevin Durant when he won MVP. And as we've, come to learn more about Kevin Durant, that number has slowly dwindled, it feels like. With Giannis is again in a similar position there where, it seems like he's just a great dude and a tremendous human being and has basically universal appeal to everyone.
Yeah, I've actually heard some stories about him and his agent and just how he conducts himself. And Giannis is really, really impressive. He's really grateful for being discovered and being in the NBA. He actually sees it as an honor to do this stuff. And that sounds kind of weird to say, but the guy's just a really, really good dude. And I'm glad that he's kind of moving into that position where he's going to represent the league. I think that's a great spot for the league.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It helps the game internationally. It's just a good dude to be representing the league, around the entire world and certainly in the United States. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Let's talk about Zion Williamson. Let's go with next, because I pitched you something in a text message that you still haven't responded to me on yet. So this will be fun. I have no idea.
It's been a long week.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if you think I'm fucking crazy for this or not, but I threw you the idea of, is Zion the number one asset in the NBA right now? Obviously no team has more than a 14% chance to get him. So I'm not saying 14% of Zion, is that potential to get Zion, the best thing that any team can have right now. I'm saying if you were to throw Zion in the player pool of the entire NBA right now, would he be the most wanted asset across the league?
So we're talking about trade asset, right? As far as would he be the most coveted, or we're talking about trade value. I'm not sure exactly the dynamic of.
We'll say you throw every single asset in the league into a fantasy draft scenario. And it's, everyone has their current contract costs. Everyone has their current contract situation, free agency situation, everything. Would Zion be picked first?
That's a really great question. He might be, honestly, from what we've seen, and just the contract control, like you noted, for 8 or 9 years, you have this guy, and he actually has the ability to be the best player in the NBA, in my opinion. So I think you can make a strong case for it. I don't think every team would agree. I like to look at it as I'm looking at especially young guys and on rookie scale contracts. So would Dallas trade Luka for a chance at Zion? I don't think so. Would Memphis trade Jaren Jackson for Zion? Maybe, but I doubt it because that's not how the league works. But after that, I don't think the Suns would trade DeAndre Ayton for Zion either, but I don't know. That's more gray area. I think he's more in that range where you can make a really strong case. I think that teams would rather have him than Jason Tatum, even with how much Tatum has proved himself. So that's how high level we're talking.
Yeah, I definitely think teams would rather have Zion than Tatum.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. I think really if we're looking at assets on rookie contracts or even overall, I think that Luka is really the only guy in Zion's tier for me. I still don't think Dallas does that, but other than him, I think Donovan Mitchell, I think teams would rather have Zion. So that's it for me.
So I think this is a really tough question. So Giannis has 2 years left after this one, if I remember correctly, right?
I think yes, because he has a player option. I think he has a player option at some point, correct? Because it's the same.
No, he doesn't. It's flat.
Okay.
And he's at I want to say 25. I think he signed a 4-100, something like that.
Yeah, you're right. He's 25-8 next season, and then in 2020 he's 27-5. So you're right. It's not a player option.
So I think that I would still take Giannis. I think in this scenario, I still think I would rather take 3 years of Giannis than bet on 7 to 8 years of Zion Williamson, because I think that Giannis makes you an immediate contender right now. Plus his contract at $25 million is not just so over the top insane that you can't build.
Yeah, Giannis is a very strong argument here. I would probably lean that way too, of course, without knowing any other details about likelihood of resigning and whatnot. But
right.
It's what we're trying to convey here is it's a very high level asset that we're talking about with Zion, and it's going to take someone who is an established star with some certainty moving forward, or a young prospect who's very, very elite to circumvent Zion. I think that he's in that top 5-ish conversation when we talk about the entire league.
So James Harden is 29 years old. You'll get his age 30, 31, 32, 33 years, basically at 42 million-ish a pop. Would you rather have Zion or James Harden as an asset? Now that
I would rather have Zion.
Yeah, now that Harden is signed essentially for 5 years.
I think I would rather have Zion given the contract, and you're going to get really high-level play, I think, out of the next 2 to 3 years. Houston would rather have Harden for their current winning demands, right? That's the question, too. We have to factor in actual realism to some extent, but if we're talking about in a vacuum, I would rather have 8 years of Zion and cost control there for 4 years. I just think that he has a chance to be a top 5 player in the NBA, so I would take Zion.
Man, that's so hard. That is so hard. Because James Harden's really good.
He's insane.
You get him for 5 years, but 5 older years at a high price.
Let's be clear. Harden is incredible. And if I could guarantee that I'm going to compete right now, if I got Harden and I got 2 other stars, I would probably take Harden if I'm in that position, right? If I'm actually a GM and I'm okay, I have a chance to do this, sure. But it's in a vacuum. It's just really tough, man. When you get to those kind of 30-year-old guys like Durant, for example, of course, he has the contract situation that's not great because he can opt out with the 1+1. But those guys, I get any case for the elite players in the NBA over Zion. If we're factoring contracts, I think you kind of have to lean Zion in a lot of these cases.
Do you feel the same way about Steph as well? Steph has 3 years after this one at essentially 43 million-ish a year.
That's really tough because I think Steph is going to age better than almost anyone just because of the way he plays his game. I don't know if he's going to drop off. So I might take Steph there. That's really, really tough. Same tier.
Yeah. Man, that's hard. I think I might take Steph. I really think I might take Steph.
Yeah, I mean, the cost, I mean, at $40 million, I'm fine paying that because that's one of those max contracts we talk about where you're getting the full value of that contract. So I don't really care about the $40 million because he's worth it and more than that, not just for tickets, but for like surplus value of his actual value on the floor. I don't have a problem paying him $40 million. I think he's going to live up to that over the next 3 years.
And then I guess the other one that we have to talk about in regard to like the max guys tier is Nikola Jokic. Jokic you have for 5 years at essentially like 29 to 30 million a year.
Yeah, that's tough. And I'm a Jokic guy, but I would go Zion pretty easily here. And that's hard for me to say because Jokic is incredible. He's like maybe a tier 2 MVP candidate this year, maybe tier 1, however you want to argue it. But I think I would take Zion. I still have to see Jokic do it in the playoffs. And I know that's kind of like very old school as far as approach, but I think I would take Zion.
No, I think that's reasonable. A lot of NBA folks do have very real questions about Jokic in the playoffs and just how you might be able to kind of scheme around him and take him away a little bit. would I take Jokic or Zion? That's hard. That's definitely a same tier. Are you going to make me, it's a cop-out to not answer, I feel like. You know what I mean? Like I have
absolutely. This is tough.
I do think that I would take... Oh, man. It would depend on market size. If I was a bigger market, I would probably take... Well, if I was a smaller market, I would probably take Zion, is the way to put it. Because if I was a smaller market, I would trust Zion to just straight up like sell tickets like crazy and sell merchandise and be like an immediate guy who really just makes me so much money off the bat. Okay,
so I have one for you here. LeBron James. 2019 locked up for 37.4, 2020 39.2, and then a player option in 2021 for 41. You taking LeBron or you taking Zion?
If I was in LA, I would probably take... If I was in LA or New York, I would probably take LeBron. If I was anywhere else in the country, I would take Zion.
Okay, so you're going for like if you're a big market, you can attract other stars. I think that's a good way to approach this. I don't even know what the correct way to approach this is, but that seems reasonable at least for me.
Yeah. But it says a lot, like, if we're considering Zion over LeBron James in, like, even certain markets.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the caliber of prospect we're talking about, though. I mean, I think he's going to be a generational guy. Like, if you look back the last, 4 drafts or 3 drafts, he's a tier 1 guy for me. With Luka and with Ben Simmons, I think he's a better prospect than Ben Simmons is. So that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I was going to say, would you take Zion or Ben Simmons?
Zion easily.
I think I would take Zion as well. Would you take Zion or Karl Anthony Towns, who is signed for 5 years past this one at I believe like 30 million a pop?
Yeah, for me it's Zion just based on player quality. I'm very interested in seeing what his ceiling is. I think Karl is absolutely fantastic. Of course, we talked about that in the past, but I think his defensive deficiencies, he hasn't improved at the rate that I was honestly hopeful he would. So I think I would take Zion there. And that's not really even factoring contract situation. I just think straight up as prospects, and because Karl's still a young guy, I would take Zion.
I will say I think Towns' defense has gotten better since Tibbs left.
Imagine that.
Tough, though. Same tier for me as someone who is generally a pretty big believer in Karl Towns. I think that there's just way too much of a rush to try and crush him as a player. He has basically everything that you're looking for from a prospect right now in the NBA. He's a 39% 3-point shooter as a 7-footer. He is, an awesome rebounder on both ends of the floor, incredibly efficient, can really, really dominate offensively. Defensively, obviously there are real concerns. I do think he's been better. I probably would take... Oh, man. I think I would take Towns. I think.
It's fair. Like, for me, it's pretty easily Zion, and it's a pro-Zion argument more than it's an anti-Towns, even though it's a little bit to do with Towns' defense at the 5. I just have a thing about defending at the 5 position. If you can't do it at a high level, I'm pretty suspect, and Towns is about as good as you're ever going to get offensively. So It's still a little bit reserved there.
It's hard because Zion, there are still concerns here. Can't, he's not a consistent shooter. I think the shot will come eventually, but he's not a consistent shooter yet. Defensively, he's a defensive impact. Like he will just straight up make an impact every single time he's on the floor defensively because of the athleticism and power. But he really gambles and gets out of position pretty regularly, and he has the recovery speed to make up for it, but he does fuck up there occasionally. I think that like all of the like other skill stuff, he has it, and he's just going to be able to drive to the lane whenever he wants. He's going to be able to get into the paint with ease. You know, we talk about the increased spacing around the NBA. It's just going to absolutely help him so much.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that the hop step move is going to be one of those things where it's a revolutionary move that not a lot of guys can do at his size. We've talked about that in the past. I have another player for you. Let's assume full health here, because that would be an easy cop out if not. You've taken Joel Embiid on this contract, 25-4 this year, 27-5, 5 years guaranteed. Let's assume he's fully healthy, because you can't answer this otherwise. Would you take Joel Embiid or Zion?
If we're assuming full health, I would take Embiid.
Okay.
If we're assuming the current situation right now, which I don't know that you can assume full health, it's tight. That's really tight. That's tough.
Embiid's a really fascinating one, just because he does bring that defense, even though he has been kind of exploited a little bit just by one team, and that's Al Horford with the Celtics. And I think there are some deficiencies in the playoffs, but he's really fucking good.
Just generally, what do you think of his defense this year? Because I do think it's like taking a small step backward.
I haven't watched enough Philly. I've watched a decent amount, but not enough to really chime in historically. I think it's obviously very good. I just think
like he's still very clearly a top like 7 defender in the NBA, no doubt in my mind. Like last year though, I thought he was like probably number 2 or number 3 behind Gobert.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely fair. Honestly, I thought his defense against Boston last year in the playoffs, and it wasn't just Horford. I thought some of the finishing play stuff wasn't there. I was kind of disappointed with him and Simmons a little bit in that series. I can say that 100%. He's still very good, but just not that elite level defender. This year, from what I've seen, he's been very good. I can't really chime in more than that.
Yeah. Joel's really good. I don't know that there's man, Joel or Zion. I do think I would take Joel. I really do.
Okay.
I mean, if I'm going to take like Karl Towns over him, I basically have to take Joel, right?
Yeah, I mean that's very fair. For me, Joel is he's older than you'd think too, so the window is not as big as people think it is. Like he's a little bit older as a prospect, and Zion, I think that would be my easy argument for Zion, is just you're getting like 5 or 6 additional years in your prime, because Zion's still 18.
Well, here's the antithesis of that argument though. You're probably not getting peak Zion until he's like 22. So you have the 3 years at the start where you're like building up towards something.
I think this kind of builds into your argument about big market teams. And in a way, if you can assemble like a winning team right now around Embiid, like of course the Sixers have it, but I'm not sure they have quite the level of team that can win a title. Of course, the Warriors reign over everybody there. But if you can place a winning team and you can really compete for a championship right now, I can see an argument for Embiid for sure.
Yeah, I think I would take Joel for what it's worth. I do.
Okay, I have another one for you, because you're like the captain of this ship. Ayton or Zion?
Zion. I would take Zion.
Ooh, yeah. I'm a little surprised.
I would. I really love DeAndre. I am a huge DeAndre Ayton fan. I think he is going to be an all-NBA player. I also think Zion is going to be an all-NBA player. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm obviously a little bit lower at Ayton, so I would take Zion pretty easily. Last one on my end, I can't answer this question. I don't know if you did already, but Luka or Zion?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I do think that I would take Zion right now. I do.
Okay. They're same tier for me. That's as far as I can get. I go back and forth. I think if Zion shoots, it's clearly Zion. But I do have a little bit of reservations about that pull-up. And with Luka, you don't have that. You can never take Luka away with that step back and that ability to shoot over the top. So I go back and forth. I think that if Luka gets a little more athletic, maybe he can challenge, even if Zion gets a respectable jumper. But in that case, I would lean Zion. I just don't know.
Yeah, man. Making me go against my guy DeAndre. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Yeah, no, I mean, that's where we're talking about, though. We're talking about the best assets in the NBA, basically. And Zion will immediately fit into that conversation somewhere. We don't exactly know where. I don't know that I think you're a little bit higher on Zion than I am, which is crazy considering I've now called Zion like the best prospect since Anthony Davis to basically everyone who works in an NBA front office that's asked me. So I'm very, very high on Zion. It's hard, man. It's hard for me to pass up on like guaranteed production. And that has nothing to do with like me like being like not confident in my evaluation. It's just that there are still questions about Zion's game that I think need to be answered.
Absolutely. I think it's just he's just really, really intriguing. Of course, we don't have to sell him as a prospect. I think everybody's pretty much on board. Well, almost everyone. Some people still have other people at number one, and that's just, we're not going to talk about that because it's very disappointing. But I think
here's the thing though, like it's just wrong. I mean,
it's flagrantly wrong. Let's just be clear about that.
Like in regard to, and like, look, if he comes back from medicals and there are flags for whatever reason, I'm not necessarily expecting that. I'm just saying, like, if there are, this conversation changes, right? This could totally be different. But until then, man, like it's just not even debatable. Like like Zion has the best PER since it's been quantified over the last decade in college basketball. And it's by a long shot. It's like the difference between Zion and number 2 is like the difference between like number 2 and like number 40 or something like that in PER. And then you throw in like, hey, PER doesn't really account for defense. Oh, well, Zion's a really fucking good defender as well. Oh, wait, like PER, it rewards guys that are high volume players. Well, Zion's not even the highest volume guy on his team right now. So like, it's just fucking insane how good Zion is. There's just no excuse to not have him at number 1.
Well, in the impact metrics, I mean, he's got a 21.7 box plus minus. That is like 3 points higher than Anthony Davis, who is number 3, actually. Brandon Clarke, I think, is ahead of Anthony Davis. Brandon Clarke's a bad motherfucker, dude. Like, that dude is really good. We can talk about him in the draft section if you want to, but
yeah, we will.
Yeah, I mean, historically, Zion, as far as impact on college, is just absolutely outrageous. His efficiency, his playmaking on defense. You noted the gambling, definitely a riverboat gambler a little bit, but he turns plays. Like, he will flip plays in transition. He'll get out in the break because he gets steals. He gets a ton of weak side blocks. He talks about team defense in interviews, so I'm all in on the guy.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. He is a legit great player. Something he's not going to have to worry about anytime soon, though, is losing his hair. 66% of men lose their hair by the age of 35. The thing is, though, that when you start to notice that hair loss, it's too late. If that hairline slowly starts to creep backwards over the next little while, how are you going to feel a year from now whenever it's no longer business as usual up there? Go to forhims.com to stop that slow march backward. It's a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and sexual wellness for men. Thanks to science, baldness can be optional. Hims connects you with real doctors and medical grade solutions to treat hair loss. There's no waiting room. There's no awkward doctor visit. You just save hours by going to forhims.com. It's so easy. All you got to do is answer a few questions and the doctor will review and help prescribe what you need. And then those products are shipped directly to your door. Order now, and my listeners are going to get a trial month of Hims for just $5 right now while supplies last. See that website for full details. This would cost hundreds if you went to the doctor or a pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/game theory. That's FORHIMS.com/game theory, GAMETHEORY, forhims.com/game theory. Oh boy, Cole, let's talk about DeAndre Hunter. So coming into the year, I had DeAndre Hunter at my best returning prospect in college basketball. I had, I think, 6 other freshmen ahead of him at the time. That was wrong. He should have been at like number 4 on my board, in my opinion, looking back. It's just an incredible, he's so awesome. He is just an immediate impact player in the NBA, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just think he's really solid in this class. You know what you're getting from him. In my opinion, he's the best wing defender in the class as far as a real switch guy. And I think that I kind of wrote about this in my piece, is like that gets thrown around a little too cavalierly as far as guys who can really switch and actually make a difference on the ball. And
so
he's guarded
strongly
basically.
Agree with that. I so agree with that.
Yeah, so I think that in the draft especially, we have a wing type that we think can fit these measurements. Like maybe KZ Paul. I'm a little lower on him than you are, but if he's considered like this dynamic switch guy, I think you're giving too
defensively. They're not even close. Like it's not even a conversation. Like DeAndre is so much better than KZ defensively. And I think there are reasons for that. Like I'm not a huge fan of Stanford's defensive like scheme. So for people who don't know, Stanford like sells out like crazy to stop the 3-point line. And what it results in are a lot of like kind of off balance closeouts. And it ends up looking like his feet are kind of stuck in the mud. So I can't really tell right now if with Casey, it's, a situation where he's closing out heavy because that's what the coaches want him to do. And he has some quickness once you get him on balance, wants to teach him a little bit better technique, or if it's a situation where he just doesn't have great feet.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And for me, it's just like we don't know with KZ, but some people are attributing him like this potential wing stopper potential, and they're moving him up boards because he's got great measurements, which is fine. He can shoot off the catch. I believe in his shot. But with Hunter, we know he can guard. We've seen 2 years of this evidence on multiple different players. Like we've seen him guard RJ Barrett this year. And when he actually guarded RJ and RJ tried to drive, he just completely enveloped him. Like RJ couldn't do anything against him as far as in an isolation setting. Like he did make some threes. I think some of that's the scheme with Virginia playing gap defense and trying to dissuade drives. And I think that, honestly, I think if Hunter was just like, I'm taking you out of the game, I'm going to guard you, I'm going to face guard you the entire game, RJ wouldn't have done well. Just because Hunter is that caliber of individual on-ball defender. He's defended Zion. I thought he'd done a pretty good job, about as well as you could hope for. Kept Zion in front. Of course, you can't keep Zion from exploding over the top of you. He guarded Marvin Bagley last year. We see what he did with Kobe White the other night with his length. You just go down the list. He can guard everybody.
Yeah, he's a monster defensively. Like he is just an immediate impact player defensively, I think. Like there is nothing that makes me think otherwise. Offensively, I think the big question is whether or not you believe in the jump shot. He's shooting 45% from three this year. That's a mirage. He is not a 45% 3-point shooter. And this comes from someone who is a big fan of him. He's shot 42% from three on 100 attempts over 2 years. That's not where he's at as a shooter. So the question is, how do you believe that the jump shot translates to the next level? It has like kind of a robotic, I don't want to say hitchy. It's not necessarily hitchy, but it is like a 2-motion-y jumper a little bit. He he utilizes different footwork into his jump shot often. Sometimes he goes left-right into the jumper. Sometimes it's right-left into the jumper. It's just like a little bit inconsistent, but he has such good touch that like it just kind of works out for him at this level, and he can just shoot over everyone because he's so big and so long. But like to me, I think he's shown enough now to where I feel confident you can develop that part of his game. I just really believe in him as a prospect. I think he is like almost day one starter in the NBA, is like a fifth starter if you want to.
I think the allure a lot is like you can easily see him in the playoffs. And I know a lot of people say you overvalue playoff caliber players, but Draymond Green has talked about it. There are regular season players and there are playoff players. And I think Hunter is one of the easiest guys in the class to say, he can play in the playoffs if you believe in the shooting. Like, go guard that guy. Go guard Paul George. Make it hard for him. I'm not saying he can, he's not an overwhelming athlete where he's going to take these guys away, but he can make things really difficult with his length because, a lot of guys don't have 7'2" wingspans that can move laterally like him. And I do think there are some concerns defensively as far as playmaking. I know some of it's scheme-based, but he doesn't have great feel, anticipation off the ball as far as generating events. He's not a very good weak side rim protector. Of his 21 blocks, 14 of them have come on the ball, and he's played 1,300 minutes. So it's not like this guy is, of course, like Zion, capable of rotating over and blocking shots. So you don't get a lot of the playmaking. I don't think he has great feel, but he's a switch guy. He's in a scheme in the playoffs where a lot of teams switch. I think he can handle those assignments. And then offensively, I just think his entire game is kind of rigid, and it kind of throws people off. It's effective, but it's not very aesthetic as far as watching him dribble. Everything's very slow processing. Like, he misses immediate reads. He kind of takes these slow developing dribbles, and you're just like, what are you doing? But for the shooting, he has shot versatility. Like, this guy has made 42% of his pull-ups in his career. Like, he can get shots off the dribble. We've seen him get him over the top. Like, he can shoot right over the top of RJ. If Virginia wanted to use him this way, I think he's underutilized offensively a lot of the time. Like, Virginia, when they're playing Virginia Tech and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is guarding Hunter, I think Hunter could absolutely roast him if he wanted to, just in the mid-post and stuff like that. He can get a shot whenever he wants. So I think there's more offensive ability there, and that kind of makes me optimistic about his shooting, just because we've seen a little bit of off-movement shooting. He had that off-screen shot against the recent Duke game over Marquise Bolden off the move, and that kind of fluidity, that kind of coordination, I think is going to translate to a good shooter. I'm not saying a great shooter, but I think he's going to be a capable catch-and-shoot guy, and he can do a little bit more in the mid-post, can beat switches at times, and I think that's really valuable.
So I think he is the closest thing that we have seen to Kawhi since Kawhi has come out of the draft. And Kawhi obviously had the insane, outlier level growth, right? For a development from the time he got to the NBA. I'm not saying DeAndre Hunter is going to be Kawhi, because I think that is just genuinely like kind of something you can't really expect in terms of a prospect's development track. But they have similar issues in terms of they were pretty rigid coming out of college. They didn't really see a ton of passes. Like, they were willing passers, and, you know, assist rate wise, like DeAndre was fine. And I believe Kawhi was like up about 10 in terms of assist rate in college. So they saw what they needed on the floor, but weren't necessarily elite level playmakers. Terrific defenders, multi-positional, high level defenders, 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, all of the frame stuff in the world that you could ever want. Probably a little bit more comfortable operating in the mid post as opposed to anywhere else on the floor. That was certainly Kawhi in college, and honestly kind of continues to be Kawhi to this day. Just in terms of style, I think that DeAndre is the closest I can remember to Kawhi. I don't expect him to reach that level in terms of being like a top 5 MVP candidate, but I do believe that he is the closest that I've seen to Kawhi recently in terms of just the way that they play.
Yeah, and I think just from a physical dimension standpoint, a lot of guys get compared to Kawhi, and you can just write them off immediately. Like, Mikhail's too skinny. Like, he doesn't have that strength. Josh Jackson doesn't have the length. So, like, over the years, we've seen basically a lot of wing prospects be compared to Kawhi, and you can just
Rui
dismiss them outright.
this year is the other one. I honestly get more comparisons with Rui to Kawhi than DeAndre to Kawhi, and I don't agree with that.
Oh, that's wild to me. That's very wild. If you're talking defense first, that's pretty crazy. But yeah, for Hunter, he's not an overwhelming athlete. Like, I think Kawhi is more athletic, and I think Kawhi has better feel. Like, Hunter's feel still like leaves something to be desired. Like, Kawhi, yeah. I didn't watch college basketball very in depth at that stage, but I remember Kawhi initiating more sets. I think Kawhi's handle is better. He's got more dribble moves. Like, Hunter can play face-up basketball. I think his handle's a little underrated, but it's not high level. It's a little rigid there.
But it's straight line. You're right. It's always straight line.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying stylistically, like, Hunter wins a lot in the mid post, not as strong. And of course, Kawhi added strength, so it's very hard for me to compare because I don't remember Kawhi's build in college. But now he's just a behemoth, right? He drops his shoulder, and he can get a shot anytime he wants. Maybe Hunter gets to that level. I think Hunter's kind of an amorphous frame too. Like, I feel like he can switch his frame and like add strength or lose weight pretty easily. Like if you look at him last year compared to this year, I think there are some differences there. So maybe that's something to factor in as well. If he just gets super big and he can really manhandle guys in the post, even though a lot of teams don't play that way anymore.
Yeah. I'm a big DeAndre Hunter fan. Where do you, so I will say this, like, I have DeAndre Hunter at number 4 right now on my board. How would you compare him and Cam Reddish? I think that is, like, I was having this conversation with a college coach earlier today.
Great question.
Like, Cam Reddish, I believe, is what, like 2 years younger, 2.5 years younger, something like that? Maybe 2 years younger.
Yes.
Because Cam's a little bit old for his age, not crazy old, but like a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little less than 2 years. So because he's 19.5 right now, and Hunter is 21.2. Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of reason to believe that Cam Reddish is going to grow. He has more natural ball skill. He's a more natural shooter. But DeAndre is just, I think he has better feel for the game. I think he has better defensive ability. Certainly, you can just believe that he's going to step in and make an immediate impact in terms of winning plays. I mean, if you had to pick one of those two, who are you taking right now?
That's a great question. And I have the ultimate cop-out is that whatever I'm doing, I'm trading back in this draft. But if I was forced to pick one, like that's how I'm approaching this draft. If I get 2 to 5, like I don't want to pick in that range this year. I don't think the value is there. I want to get out. If I can get Hunter at 12 or 13 compared to Reddish at 3, I would rather have Hunter plus the asset. I mean, that's the way I'm thinking about it.
I don't think there is any way DeAndre Hunter has fallen to 12. I will just say that now. I understand like that where people have him right now on mock drafts. I don't think there's any way he has fallen to number 12.
Yeah, I want to believe you, but honestly, after all these years, I've been surprised many a time with how these guys are evaluated. I think there are concerns with Hunter, but like it's not in this class. Like it just comes down to what you value. I think I think Reddish versus Hunter is very fascinating, just because for me, Reddish is more of like a big wing team defender, where he's very good in the passing lanes, but he doesn't have anywhere near Hunter's lateral athleticism and on-ball defense. So it's kind of like stylistically, what do you prefer? I don't think Reddish is going to guard these elite wing defense or these wing offensive players. I just don't think he's that athletic. I've been saying that all year. Is like I think his athleticism is way overrated. But I trust Cam Reddish's shot more. I think he shoots an easy ball. I expect him to be a better shooter. Honestly, whenever he shoots, I think it's going in, but it almost never does, it seems like. It's just very weird, that dynamic. But it's very interesting because I view Cam Reddish more as like, if he gets to Otto Porter's level right now, that's a very good player, and that's more of the player I see than I see this initiator type. So it's more stylistically, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the on-ball defense, or do you prefer the team defense and more like maybe more shooting upside? So it's very close. Okay, so I think I'm at the point with Cam, because we should just talk about Cam now. We've hit enough on DeAndre at this stage, I think. With Cam, I really think that Duke's total lack of spacing and his willingness to kind of sink into being the third guy behind Zion and RJ has created a situation where it's similar to kind of Kevin Knox last year. Remember, we kind of had this conversation about like how athletic is Kevin Knox in the half court, right? Oh, yeah.
I think it's kind of a similar deal with Cam. Like, Kevin Knox is athletic enough in the half court, and I think that Cam is too. And a large reason why we don't get to see it often is he doesn't have the space to operate in the mid-range because Zion's always there. You know, there's always the point guard help defender helping off of Trey because there's just no reason to have to guard Trey close out on the perimeter. Guys sink in off of RJ regularly. They often play a regular center like Marquise Bolden or Javon DeLaurier next to Cam Reddish. So like, I think that there's just so little space for him to operate in the condensed college zone offensively that we haven't yet seen the best of his athleticism.
I think that's fair to an extent. Like, I do think he's going to be better with NBA space 100%, but I still don't see the athleticism when he should show it, even in advantageous situations. Like, he's attacking a closeout. There's a lot of times where he could dunk the ball and he just doesn't have the bounce to get up, and he has space to do it. So I do think his athleticism is pretty overrated. And I think Knox tricks you a lot because, like, we saw that dunk the other night where he can really explode off too. Yeah, that kind of play isn't reminiscent or isn't like a holistic approach to evaluating athleticism. Like, Knox is finishing at like 38% this year. And there are other reasons for that, not just athleticism. It's like he's never been a good finisher. It might be some touch, even though he's got great touch on the floaters, but he's not very comfortable yet, taking that extra step to get to the rim. But for me, Cam is just like, even in the plays that he should show athleticism in the space, like, he's not doing it to the level that you'd expect. Like, I think it's pretty underwhelming there, but I do agree with you that he's going to look better at the NBA level than he does right now.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Brandon Clarke. You wanted to talk about Brandon Clarke. I will just give you the floor to talk about Brandon. He's obviously just fucking awesome. Like, he is someone that I am just... The positional questions, they exist, and I think are reasonable. He's just so goddamn good. He knows where to be every single possession of every single game. He's just insane.
Yeah, I always want to talk about Brandon Clarke because he's honestly saving a lot of the season for me, because I will watch every Gonzaga game that's televised because he is must-see TV in my opinion. He just gets it, man. He's so good. He's like literally, he's easily the second best player in the country this year. And I'm saying that as a big Grant Williams fan, but I think Brandon Clarke is on a different level than even him. That's how fucking good that guy is at basketball. Like, some of the games I watch, he literally doesn't make any mistakes in the entire game. He rotates, he blocks a ton of shots, he's always in the right place. I'm higher on his shooting upside. Just watching how his touch has translated, like when he attacks the rim, and he's even at high speeds, like he finishes well. I'm not talking about just dunks. I'm talking about like touch shots, like runners. I think that he's going to be able to shoot threes in time off the catch. Maybe nothing off the dribble from three, of course, because that's getting way too far ahead. But I do think that there is more shooting upside than he gets credit for. He's just if we're just going on the best players this year, he's the second best player in the country. And this guy's athletic is all hell. Like, this is what I don't get. It's not like this is just some college player. Like, he's like the second or third conservatively most athletic player in this draft if he declares. Like, this guy's insanely quick off the floor, great bounce, all of that stuff. The anticipation, he's one of the smartest players in this draft, and this draft lacks a lot of that IQ at a high level. He's just off the charts there.
I think that if you think you can teach him to shoot, he is a lottery pick, just straight up. Like, if you believe that you can teach Brandon Clarke to shoot it at a high level, you should take him somewhere in the lottery. I am somewhat skeptical of that. I'm not like fully skeptical of it. Like I've talked to NBA executives that just straight up do not think he will ever shoot. I'm not there necessarily because I do agree with you that he shows good touch around the basket. He does have a nice little floater game. It's not a question of touch. I think it's a question of mechanics, and he has shown the willingness over the course of his career to really, really work and really improve. If you don't think he can shoot, I think he is like right around 20th overall. If you think you can teach him to shoot, I think he's like 10th overall. And I'm willing to just make that bet on it. Like if you just flat out, like you straight up believe this kid will shoot one day, no questions asked, where do you take him?
Oh, top 5 for me. He might go number 2. I'm not even trying to be hyperbolic here. Like this guy is legit good.
And that's if you think he can shoot. If you're projecting him to shoot, no questions asked.
Yes, 100%. If you have if you are saying he's going to shoot for sure, then I have absolutely no problems taking him even at number 2 in this class. I think he's just that good at basketball, and there's enough indicators that I'll buy. Again, like we're not the biggest fans of going by free throw percentage for shooting upside or whatnot necessarily in a vacuum, but this guy was 56% his freshman year. He's 67% this year, and that's not a huge leap, but again, this is a guy who overhauled his mechanics, right? I mean, if you watched him in San Jose State, he was shooting, grenade launcher shots off his shoulder. And now
it was a really legit shot put off of his shoulder.
Exactly right. And I was watching his tape and I loved so much of his tape. And then you got to that, you're like, son of a bitch. Like this is, and then
you're like, now it's a little, who taught you that? Like, what are you doing?
Wild. And that's another thing we can get into at a later time about how these guys develop their shots and why the hell some of them have these mechanics when they shouldn't. But Clarke is definitely one of those guys. And I think that, now it's still mechanical. It's very rigid as far as that goes. But he's had some really promising, like, pick and pops, some spot ups. He's shooting, he hasn't shot a ton of threes this year, but he's 4 of 11. Yeah, 11 threes, made 4. Nobody's really going to buy him as a shooter based on his stat page, but I think if you project and look at like the runner touch and you look at the progressions mechanically, and some of the makes he's made just on film are pretty impressive. Like they look somewhat convincing, I would say. Yeah.
I think I'm closer to your side than the other side. Over the last 10 games, he has won the Ken Pom MVP of the game 7 times. He is just like on a ridiculous tear right now. He is dominating every single time that he steps on the floor. Let's also I just want to shame the voters for these Hall of Fame awards that they give out.
Thank you.
The Kareem Abdul Jabbar, the what's the other one? The Karl Malone, the power forward and the center, best power forward, best center in the country awards. He is on neither of those top 10 lists. Brandon Clarke, I don't know if I would say he's the second best player in the country. He might be. He's like right around there, I think. But like he's certainly in the top 5 overall players in college basketball. And he is not on either of those top 10 positional lists. Can we talk about the center list? I think it's the worst award list I've ever seen in my entire life.
I don't have it in front of me, so do you mind sharing it? I don't know what the list was.
It is the best center in college basketball. The best center in college basketball. So I'll read you the ones that are like reasonable, right? Daniel Gafford, okay. Bruno Fernando, Charles Bassey, Ethan Happ. Like we can talk about like Charles Bassey and whether or not we think he's like projectable to the NBA and all that jazz, right? But what Bassey has done this year, I think is pretty reasonably impressive. I think he's at like 16 and 10, 15 and 10 right now with 2.5 blocks a game. Genuinely, like that's really, really good. And I think that he deserves credit for what he's done this year. Gafford, again, I think he's at like 18 and 10, something like that, 18 and 9. Ethan Happ's obviously an incredible college basketball player. And then Bruno Fernando has been great this year as well. So Nick Perkins at Buffalo, who does not start for them, straight up does not start. Nico Carvacho at Colorado State, leading the country in rebounding. Not really a huge difference maker, even in the Mountain West. Jesse Govan at Georgetown. Nick Ward at Michigan State, 2 guys who really just can't defend it all. Nathan Knight at William & Mary. Have you watched any Nathan Knight?
I have not. I've seen the rest of these guys, but I have not seen Nathan Knight.
So Nathan Knight is like, 6'10", 7'2" wingspan. They play, I believe, like a Princeton style of offense, if I remember correctly from watching them earlier this year. He's a good passer. It's like Nathan Knight is probably like the 5th or 6th guy on this list, like in terms of like best guys on this list. So I have bigger complaints than having Nathan Knight on this list, weirdly. Moses Brown is on this list.
Oh my God.
Give me your thoughts on Moses Brown.
I mean, they're not good, so I don't know how much I should really share, but good God. Looking at this list, bottom line for me is if Brandon Clarke's not on any top 5 list in the country as far as being good. Do you know what
Moses Brown is shooting from the free throw line right now?
I've seen his form, so I'm guessing like 40s?
Lower.
Oh my God.
34.7.
Oh wow, that's got to be some kind of record.
95 free throws this year, and he's hitting 34.7%. And look, like I think Moses Brown at some point down the road can probably be like a pretty good college basketball player, and maybe has some NBA potential if he can fill out his frame. I remember talking to you earlier this year about his jump shot form, and I said, this is genuinely the ugliest jump shot I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and I 100% agree with you. Watching him at the foul line, that stroke is just the hitch, and just the delivery and how segmented it is very, very low level.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I'm looking up right now, just in terms of players that have taken at least 90 free throws in a year and made less than 40%. There are more than what I thought there would be. I will say that. Let's see. Pulling it up now. We've got 66 guys that have done this before. The lowest number, Lawrence Myers at Jackson State, 12% on 125 free throws.
That's an incredible flex, by the way.
2000. That is unbelievable. Rokas Gustis, by the way, at Hofstra a couple years ago, ended up transferring up to Rutgers. He took how many free throws here? He took 100 and was at 28%. Taco Fall, I believe, this year is at 32.5%. So Moses Brown is not even the worst this year, by the way.
I wonder if there's ever been an NBA prospect that's in the 30s from the line. I don't have my database in front of me. But
I'm looking this up right now. Dan Gadzurich was at 39 one year at UCLA, but not his draft year.
Okay.
So Gadzurich played in the NBA for a little bit at least. Joey Dorsey got drafted at least. He was at 38. I don't know did Joey Dorsey end up playing in the NBA?
Yeah, I thought he played a couple of games for Houston, right? I think that was in that Morey story, and then they realized he wasn't very good pretty quickly.
Yeah, he was a great college player though. Shout out Joey Dorsey. Yeah, I think that those are the only two I'm seeing here that it took at least 90 free throw attempts and made under 40%.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's a very, very low number. There's not much to be encouraged about if you're shooting 30s from the line on that kind of volume.
Yeah, so Moses Brown, I think at some point he might be an NBA prospect. He's just nowhere close right now. In terms of guys that I think should be on this list, I would have Teskey on this list. I would have Neemias Quetta on this list over these guys. I would have Tariq Owens from Texas Tech on this list over a lot of these guys. Mike Dahm plays center for South Dakota State. I think he's nominated for the Karl Malone Award, but he's a center. He should be nominated for this award, and actually would have helped them a lot if they would have, correctly positioned him within the voting. I'm trying to think who else. Would you have Jack Salt over any of these guys? Would you rather have Jack Salt or Moses Brown this year? I think I would rather have Jack Salt.
Me too. I mean, he takes, just for screen setting alone, that guy sets some awesome screens.
Yeah. That's where I'm at. Trying to think, is there anyone else that we could... Zylan Cheatham doesn't really play center for Arizona State. He does occasionally, but not really. Yeah, I think that's, we just named a bunch, and plus Brandon Clarke, the guy who brought this conversation the whole way. Would you take Kyler Kelly over any of these guys, the center from Oregon State?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've probably seen 2 Oregon State games, so I haven't seen enough. But from what I have seen, against USC, he was pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's effective, at least at the college level. Oh, a guy that I would definitely have. I would have Nick Claxton at Georgia over a lot of these guys.
Oh, love Nick Claxton. That guy I think he's kind of a special athlete for his size. Like he's perimeter defense. I can't remember who he contained. I had the clip of this, but he can really get in his stance, and he's got some really intriguing offensive upside and defensive upside with his skill set. I think before we talked about him compared to Rayshawn Hammonds on that team, and who would you rather have? I think I said Hammonds at the time. I would flip that. I would definitely rather have Claxton. Yeah,
I agree with you. I'm going to write about Nick Claxton, I think next week. Something going up next week, I think, on Nick Claxton included with some other guys. But yeah, like it's just not even like half these guys should not even be remotely near this list. It is honestly the worst list I've ever seen put together for an award in the history of awards.
It's really bad. Did you say Fernando is on this list or not?
Yes, he is.
Okay, good. Okay, I actually think he's been pretty solid this year. So as someone who was a skeptic in his freshman year, I think he's improved a little bit. So I liked him there. But yeah, for me, it's just like Brandon Clarke is he's not only one of the best 5 players this season in college by a very wide margin, he's having one of the best college seasons we've seen in a long time. And you can say he might just be a college player. No, I don't believe that. But the guy he's been incredible this year. The level of play he's put together is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, like people will look at Bruno Fernando's counting numbers and would probably, and like just the measurables of being 6'10" with a 7'4" wingspan and looking more like a traditional center, I guess. And probably would say Bruno Fernando. Brandon Clarke has been a lot better than Bruno Fernando this year. And this comes as someone that is like, I think I am ready to say, like, I would understand a team using a first round pick on Bruno Fernando. Like, it took me a while to get there, just because I'm not a guy that thinks it's worth taking draft picks on centers right now in the NBA, but I think that you might be able to convince me that there is some like starter equity there at some point if he can really, really focus in defensively.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, honestly, in the placement of the draft. I mean, I don't value Fernando as like a high-level starter. You might have some bottom-level ability on certain teams, but I do understand the hype around the late first round. I think that you can convince me of a lot of guys in that range, and Fernando has been impressive. He's, his passing has been good this year. I think his defense has improved to the extent that I can understand taking a kind of project center. He's good enough to where he's not like a full prospect like a Ike Anabogu, but I do like he's fine in that range for me.
Yeah, like if you're asking me if I'm going to take him or Naz Reid, like I'm taking him. Like no questions asked about that. LSU has been kind of interesting. Like, have you watched any of LSU recently?
I just watched the Kentucky game. I think I watched one other game, but I can't remember who the competition was.
So like they have a lot of athletes. They have lost one game since December 15th. Like, do you have any strong LSU takes?
I'm not really a fan of any of them from a prospect standpoint. I think all of them have kind of underwhelmed. Like Tremont Waters is really good. I think this year maybe he's taken a little bit of a step back, but he's just too small, and I hate being that conclusory with a prospect. But just very few guys succeed at that size. Naz Reid, I think, is really skilled. I'm not sure if I totally buy the shooting, but he's shot the ball really well in conference play. It looks pretty good, and he has NBA range. We talked about his ball handling coordination in the past. I just don't buy the decision making. I think his defense is actually a little underrated in one element. I think that he has better feel than he gets credit for.
I would love to hear this on how you believe Naz Reid's defense is underrated.
In one component. I'm just talking about feel and like the effort to make rotations. I think that he's underrated there. Like he reacts pretty quickly. He's just not good at anything specifically. Like he's not good at closing out. He's not good in space, and he can't protect the rim because he doesn't have the bounce. So is he a good defensive prospect? No. But I don't think he's like an incredibly porous defender who's bad at every single element of defense. Like he has impressed me with his decision making a little bit there.
There was a point this year where I thought he might be the worst defensive center that I've ever scouted. He's not that. He's definitely not that. I will say now. He does at least. You're right. He has the right feel in terms of knowing where to be. So that's good. He is. I think he is genuinely like a super high level like basketball mind. Just in the way that he knows how to attack closeouts and the way that he knows how to make decisions offensively, even as well as defensively. I do think that there is some like very real potential there. I just don't know that I can trust him yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think offensively, if I bought the decision making a little bit more, like he's just so wild sometimes. Like he'll just make these ridiculous passes he should never make.
That's true.
But you can see the intelligence, right? I think he is a smarter player than he gets credit for. Like I came into the season like, okay, this guy's super talented. I don't know if he has the mind. And I think I've been more impressed with the mind this season, but I still don't think he's much of a prospect just for all the limitations.
And you said you watched LSU Kentucky. I mean, let's talk about PJ Washington real quick, because
that's what I wanted to bring up. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's been awesome for Kentucky. He's been genuinely really, really good for Kentucky. I am at the point where I think he is like a top 20 prospect.
In this class, I think that's fair. Honestly, I wanted to bring him up because he's been super productive. He's been impressive, but he still doesn't pop for me. Like when I watch him play, like so many things he does, like I give him a ton of credit for improving the shooting mechanics. 100%. I even buy the shot from three. I think that he's going to be able to shoot off the catch, some pick and pops, some of the closeout attacks. He is a pretty good passer when like you double him. Like he's got good vision. He's unselfish. He had one really nice drive and kick on a closeout. I can't remember who the skip pass was to in the LSU game, but really, really, that was probably the best play I've seen him make. But when I watch him, I don't have that like it feeling with him. Like I just don't see it from like a high level intelligence standpoint, high level skill standpoint. He's fine in the late first. I think I'm there. I think he's a top 25 guy. Yeah. But you've seen some lottery talk, some top 10 talk. I'm definitely not there.
No, I agree with you. And the big thing is, I think people think he is an athlete, and you talk to coaches around the SEC and like coaches that have played him, and they're just not there on that. Like they don't see him as like a crazy athlete. And because of that, like the comparison I've been making is another Kentucky guy. Like I think he's Patrick Patterson, basically. A guy who can step out, knock down threes from distance, be a really nice little third big who can probably play both big positions. It's probably about where it is though.
Yeah, and Patrick Patterson's a great outcome. I mean, he was good.
Right,
like,
I agree.
In his prime. Yeah.
Yeah, like so that's why I'm saying like
I'm
top 20. Like I think that, if you end up with a Patrick Patterson in this draft, you're probably pretty happy at number 20.
Do you think PJ moves his feet as well as Patterson? I think PJ's feet are pretty good, but Patterson's feet were excellent. I feel like in college and like when he was actually fully healthy and in his prime, like I felt like he was really, really good at hard hedging and stuff like that. Do you think PJ's at that level?
I do. The reason I would say that is that if you watch him with the ball, his first step is very quick with the ball. And I would think that lateral quickness with his first step would translate to defense. Like they just kind of don't do a lot of that stuff at Kentucky defensively, right? So like I just having seen him with the ball, having seen that quick first step, I do think that he'll be okay in terms of guarding on the perimeter.
Okay. Yeah. I think I buy him as a perimeter defender enough. I don't think he's going to be, this is what we talked about when you can actually make a difference, like a Hunter. He makes a difference. I'm not sure if I buy PJ as like a difference maker. Like some people have compared him to fucking Kawhi, and I don't see that at all. Not even a little bit from. Yeah, and I think that we gotten to the point where we just expect Calipari like suppresses so many of his prospects because we see Devin Booker and how he blows up. I just don't see it, even again in the advantage situations that PJ has. I think he's fine. He's a very good college player. I don't necessarily see impact at the next level. I think he's fine though.
Do we want to talk about Keldon Johnson at all? Like, do you have any Keldon Johnson thoughts?
I'm pretty underwhelmed, frankly, and he was somebody I really wanted to like because I love his approach. I love but all that stuff I think overshadows a lot of the weaknesses too. You know what I mean? When you talk about him, you talk about the toughness, you talk about the physicality, the mental approach there. I just don't think he's that good of an athlete, man. And he's been exposed in space for me, like as a finisher. His drive and kick game, some of the passes haven't been there, decision making. I buy the shot more than I did. Honestly, I think he's going to shoot, but
yeah, so do I.
Every other element of his game, I'm less high on, if that makes sense.
He has a negative assist to turnover ratio right now.
That doesn't surprise me watching his film, man. He makes some really frustrating decisions.
Yeah, like it's very bizarre. And I think the part of the reason that he makes poor decisions is because he doesn't really have much diversity off the bounce. Like he is basically just like a power straight line driver right now. And then he gets caught and ends up not being able to really do anything. Like I am someone that is willing to bet on wings that play hard, that are pretty smart, I think, in terms of the way that he plays defense, and that have a requisite level of athleticism. I know that he's gotten burned a little bit defensively this year by quicker guys. I still think he's probably going to be okay in that regard at the next level. He's definitely a better team defender than he is a one-on-one defender, though. And plus, you throw in the fact that we think he's going to shoot it. Throw in the fact that I also thought I saw a little bit more playmaking in AAU when I saw him. I think that you probably take him top 17-ish. Like he's someone that I am slowly but surely like dropping a little bit on though. The problem is like, how far do you really drop a guy in this draft? Like it's hard to like drop a guy when he's going up against like Romeo Langford, right?
Yeah, I would take Langford there. He has his own bag of concerns, of course, but right. I think the sentiment here is in alignment. Like he's definitely dropped for me. I just think, honestly, I don't want to bring up Hunter every time we talk about a prospect, but I think Hunter is what a lot of people think Keldon Johnson can be. Like, I just don't see his size as impactful either. He's kind of like that 6'6" guy, but he looks more like 6'5.5". He's a little on the smaller side to me as far as how he plays. So if he's not going to be an impactful defender and really guard like bigger threes, like that would be my allure with him. If he was like 6'8", I would have a lot of allure with him, like more at least, because he could guard a bigger wing instead of being more of a 2-guard defender. I just think there's more 2-guard type defenders in the league, and none of them are like super valuable unless you're like Tony Allen level of athletic, and Keldon Johnson can't even get in that same stratosphere, of course. So
like the problem is with Keldon Johnson, like who do you take, him or Kevin Porter? Or
I was just going to ask you that.
Like who do you take, him or, like I said, like Romeo Langford? I'll say this, the guy that has continued to just slowly but surely move up for me is Kobe White.
Okay.
Like I continue, and this is coming off of a game against Virginia where he was garbage late. He was awful. He was terrible late. And I still just continue to be really, really impressed. Every time that I talk to a coach that has played North Carolina, they rave about Kobe White. Like they think he is ridiculously good. And part of it is that he's like a legit 6'5" now. They think, like, they believe he is just a lot bigger than what he used to get credit for. Like he looks big out on the floor, and he's hyper quick, and he knocks down 38% of his shots. Like he's someone that I look at and I think I'm probably going to have him in my top 15.
It's not crazy. There's a lot of people that really like him. I'm a little bit more skeptical just for I don't think he's really a point guard. I think he's more of like a scoring combo guard, but I really do buy the shot. I've always loved his shot. And he's advanced as far as his pull-up game. Like he can take these hop steps backward. He's got that step back ability. He's got a little bit of lower release, but it's really quick. So I'm not worried about his shot. And I think you're right. He is a little bit bigger than I expected, but on the right team, I could see it more. Like if he's going to go to Philadelphia, for example, and be like a bigger,
please give him to Philadelphia.
So that would be the case where I would move him up. But I kind of have to see the situation. Like if he's going to Orlando and he's like the point guard, I don't like him as much. But if he's more of like a combo shooter or scorer type, I really like that.
Yeah. No, the more I watch Kobe White, the more impressed I am. And again, this is coming off a game where he was just an abject disaster late. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
Trying to go through these guys and who we haven't touched on. But really quick, Kevin Porter.
I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've said that every time we've talked about him. It's like, I don't know. I feel the same way about Nasir Little. I like him. I like his mentality, but the dude doesn't know how to play basketball. And I'm just straight up, like, he hasn't shown that at this level. And it's frustrating because I do buy the character stuff with him so much. And he's a good athlete, very good athlete with great measurables. But man, those two guys like kind of personify this draft a lot. Like they're talented in certain respects, but I don't know if it equates to anything valuable in the NBA.
So, Kevin Porter drops, like 14 points a game in his first 5 games, right? Against Robert Morris, Vanderbilt, Stetson, Texas Tech, Missouri State. So like not a murderer's row, but Texas Tech's in there. Vanderbilt's in there with Darius Garland and a couple other potential pros. And Missouri State's like not a total mess, at least. And we all get really excited. Kevin Porter has played 9 games since then. He's averaging 6 points per 18 minutes and shooting 37% from the field.
He should have sat the year out. And I didn't want him to for our purposes because I wanted more of a sample size, of course, but he didn't do himself any justice coming back. And some of this is, I think, USC and like how they utilize him, but a lot of it's him, man. Like, again, I watched that game. I went to the Washington game here, and there were a lot of concerning body language stuff with him, and it just, yeah, I mean, all he does is take step backs, man. Like, he rarely drives in the half court, and it's just really frustrating to watch because you can see the talent, his live dribble game. He's the best in the class at creating separation. He doesn't have the best handle, but his dribble moves are like NBA caliber, like very good. It's just he hasn't put it together.
I don't know what the fuck to do with him.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
that's all I got, man.
Last guy for me that I want to mention, just because he's been impressing me every time I've watched him. I'm not entirely sure what to do with him yet, but Auburn's Chuma Okeke. We've mentioned him before.
Yeah.
I like him. I think his IQ is really good. I didn't watch the game the other night where he had just a monster stat line. I think he had like 25 or something. I'm not saying he's like a first rounder or anything, but I think he should be on the radar a little bit more. I think that he's really, really smart, and his length, he used it really well. He had one really athletic closeout attack where he just dunked on somebody. So I just think he's a little underrated right now.
Well, I think that, doesn't ESPN have him like top 40 or something?
Do they?
Now? Yeah, they have him pretty high. He's been much better lately. Like if you look at his last, I want to say like 9 games, he's averaging like 13 points and 8 rebounds and, a steal and a block a game and shooting 50% from the field and 37% from 3. Like he's doing a good job. I still am a little bit concerned about like where is he positionally, because he does have that bigger frame.
Yep.
He has a ton of length. I wonder if he is more of a position locked 4 than anything.
That's fair. Honestly, I think that's probably the best criticism of him, is like he might be a position locked 4. I don't know if he moves quite as well as I expected, even with losing some weight. I'm kind of curious on his frame upside, though, because he's definitely trimmed down from last year. I wonder if he can get a little bit more athletic.
Yeah. Another guy, I mean, like Jordan Nwora is similar to him, right, in terms of just like really trimming down. And I'm someone who, like, I'm at the point where I think if Jordan Nwora returns and, like, really, really focuses in on defense and continues to just, like, fix his body just a little bit more, I think he's going to be a 2020 first rounder.
Okay. Yeah, that's very believable to me, even though I've heard that's, like, a relatively deep class as far as not necessarily high-level talent, but just deep in general. But I like that. I think his shooting, I came out and like he had some struggles getting his shot off at times, but it's quick enough. I think I buy that there, and he's had some impressive closeout attacks.
There's that. The other guy I want to mention, did you watch any Paul Reed? I told you to watch Paul Reed.
I haven't yet.
Like a week ago.
He's on the list.
Yeah, he's interesting. He's averaging like 15 points and 10 rebounds and like a block and a steal a game in the Big East this year. So he's played like 12 games in Big East play or something like that. So it is like a bit of a prolonged run that he's been on. Defensively, there are real concerns. Yeah. he doesn't really know where to be, but he still just like makes impact plays with his length. He's interesting. He's very, very interesting to me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely add him to the docket. I got a couple rapid fires here. We've talked about this guy in the past, Matisse Thybulle. I think he's a legit first-round guy, and I know that might sound controversial, but I went back and was reading about him, and I see this on tape and flashes, but the UW zone, I think, kind of hides a lot of his lateral agility. And I was reading the ESPN's report about him at, I think, a Nike camp this summer, and they said that he was legit, like, locking guys up on the ball. Yeah. I just think he's underrated because of the zone. I think people are going to overlook him, and the shooting numbers and the production in every year is a little bit underrated as well. Like, he's not like this really bad free throw shooter. He's pretty good there, and he's good off the catch. I think his handling sequences, I think we probably talked about this on the podcast before, but like he's a better ball handler than he gets credit for, and the guy's legit fucking smart. Like he's got great feel on both sides of the ball, even offense. Like he makes some really impressive passes. He's just literally allergic to handling the ball. Like every time he gets it, it's like a hot potato. But I think there's really underrated ability there. Like for me, he's a no-brainer first rounder.
Yeah, the more I watch him, the more I think he's probably going to end up at my year-end top 30 because he's a senior, so like he's definitely in the draft this year. I think he will probably end up in my year-end top 30. And like, despite the fact that he is having his worst shooting season from 3 this season, it's his best true shooting percentage in his career because he's actually learning how to play efficient basketball and learning how to make efficient decisions. I think I'm at the point where he'll probably be like top 35 or so on my next board. And by the time like guys end up, departing the draft class, I would imagine he'll probably be top 30. Yeah, that's definitely reasonable. I really buy what I'm seeing. I've watched more UW this year than I've done in years past since Fultz. So I'm in on him. A guy I'm kind of disappointed. I will just bring up one thing on Thybulle though before we move on. Turnover rate over 20 every season of his career. Interesting. Yeah, that doesn't shock me in the games I've seen. I think he had like a 5 turnover game. He gets a little wild on some of his drives, and so that's definitely something to monitor for sure.
Eric Holman is a guy we've talked about in the past. I've been really disappointed with him recently. I know he's coming off the bench. Yeah, I mean, he's just had some really half-ass plays defensively. Like, he's not even recovering hard, not rotating hard. It just kind of seems like he doesn't give a shit. I can't remember what this game was. It might have been one of the Kentucky games that I watched, but I'm dropping him considerably. I get the allure, the shooting intersection, which I buy the shot, and I buy the rim protection and, like, the pop he has around the rim.
Yeah, but weak side rim protection, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like a 4 kind of stretch 4, I think was what you would call him, popular nomenclature, something to that effect. But his effort level is like, I've dropped him considerably.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very reasonable. Trying to think, is there anyone else like random that I've been a fan of that I've sent you recently? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm skimming this list on Tankathon. Have you watched, we've talked about him in the past, but have you watched Jalen McDaniels recently?
I have. He's very good. He's like actually figuring out how to make things work in terms of his game. They like have him operate a lot in the mid-range right now. He's very, very comfortable in the mid-range. I hope that he can extend that out to the 3-point line. He's been incredibly productive. I think you can make the case that he's probably been the most productive player in the Mountain West this season so far. Like maybe like Jordan Caroline's up there, Sam Merrill at Utah State's up there, Braxton Huggins, I think you could probably put up there. There's some dudes that are really, really good, and I think he's been as productive as any of them.
Yeah, I think I watched the Colorado State game it was the other night that was televised, and he was impressive. He had some nice passes. He has a really high motor. I watched him and Eric Coleman back to back, and that was a pretty gaping difference in effort level.
Motor,
so Yeah, exactly right. So I like a lot of him. I'm not sure exactly what he is yet, but if he goes late first round, I honestly don't have a problem with that. I would probably have him like top 40-ish. So that's like the general range. There's more allure. I kind of buy the shot a little bit, but yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to watch more.
I do think he is position locked at the 4, but he's a 4 that I think can like step out and defend.
Exactly, and he's really skinny though. That's the thing, is like he gets bodied pretty easily, and I think that's probably what you're getting to with the 4 only. And he's probably not dynamic enough to play the 3.
Right. So yeah, I think that he'll be in my top 30. I would say.
Okay.
There is like the court case out there that's hanging over him up in Washington,
forgot about that.
Which exists and is kind of gross if it's true. Most NBA folks that I've talked to so far are just monitoring it. They don't really have a gauge on it either way, and thus I don't have a gauge on it either way, but it exists and is worth mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally forgot about that. Actual last note for me this time, and then I'm good. Jarrett Culver made 2 threes the other night, which is a modern miracle in conference play, because good God, man, I've never seen like a drought like this. And of course, we've talked about the mechanics. They aren't ideal in the past, but he was shooting pretty well early in the season. And it just completely dropped off a cliff.
Yeah, so he's 7 of 44 from 3 in conference now. 2 of 5 against Oklahoma State, 1 of 3 against Oklahoma and West Virginia. I think it's bouncing back a little bit. It's starting to revert.
Oh, hopefully. We're back.
Then he went 0 of 6 against Kansas and TCU, then 4 of 5 against Arkansas. So, like, I don't know, man. I think he can shoot. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I'm not worried either. I think I've seen enough from him, enough diversity, some pull-ups and stuff like that. So I'm not like freaking out. But man, I wanted to buy 100% on him, and I'm kind of like, I'm almost there. And just the shooting maybe dropped me a little bit here.
See, like to me, he's always been a guy that I would feel in a normal draft a lot more comfortable taking in the 10 to 20 range.
Yes.
In this draft, it's just like, whoa, who the fuck do you take?
You trade back. Trade the damn pick. That's all I have for advice on this class is take Zion 1. If you can't take Zion 1, trade up to try to get Zion 1. If like the Bulls get 1, that's I think what teams should be hoping for. If they don't get it, the Bulls do, because I could see them moving it. And if not, you trade back and you try to get multiple picks, because I think the value area in this class is like the 10 to 30 range. Like that's where you're going to get like the guys that could be as good as the guys from 2 to 9. If you're getting more assets in return, I think that's the play.
Okay, if you're Dallas and you get number 1 overall, and you're the Bulls, do you and you get like number 4 overall, number 3 overall, let's say, are you willing to trade Wendell Carter and number 3 for number 1?
If I'm what team?
If you're both teams, because like we know that Dallas really likes Wendell Carter. We know that Chicago just has a front court glut still. Like,
yeah, if I'm Dallas, if I get one this year, I'm not moving it. Pretty much regardless,
100%.
So
unless I'm New York and I can get Anthony Davis, that's the only way that I think I make the case.
That was the caveat for me, is like, if you can put that kind of super team together, maybe you consider it. If you're sure that you're going to get these players, that's the only case for me. I'm more curious of, like, the Bulls get one and they're like, okay, we have Lowry in the front court, we have Wendell. Do we trade back a few spots and get John Morant, who they really like? And you can see the Bulls talking themselves into this because they have Levine at the 3, now Otto Porter Levine at the 2, Otto Porter at the 3. So if you're a team like, let's say you are the Suns and you get 3, like, I would try to move up to 1.
Would you trade DeAndre Ayton in 3 for number 1?
Oh, that's incredible, dude. Wow.
I would not, because I'm higher on DeAndre than you are. But for you, I felt like that was a real question.
No, it is a real question. It's very interesting. I think there's a larger scale deal to be worked out there. I would trade Ayton in 3 for 1, but I think that wouldn't be the only pieces in the trade. But I'm pretty much at the point where, like, unless I'm not trading Luka for 1, but unless it's like a really high level prospect like that, I'm trying to get 1.
To come full circle, would you trade Devin Booker for number 1?
I would.
Okay, there we go. Cole, tell the people where they can find that great article on DeAndre Hunter. Tell the people what's going on.
At thestepien.com, as usual, you can check that out. I'm going to try to get rankings updated in the next week, have some time over All-Star break.
Look at you.
Trying so for the site, because people keep asking, and like I'm trying to push it off just because I don't know what the hell to do with this class. So like now I have to tell everybody else that. So yeah, you can check out the DeAndre Hunter article there. It's a 40-minute read, so if you want to read it, ingest a lot of caffeine if you're insane. And as usual, we'll continue to listen to this podcast.
Go to The Athletic. I probably have a project dropping next week that'll be a bunch of articles. So go there, read that, and rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Go subscribe to The Athletic. We're going to have a lot of really great content coming out of All-Star Weekend from a lot of really great writers. Shout out Bet Online, CLNS50 promo code. Shout out Hims, Game Theory promo code. That'll be it. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.